Before we start, I want to say that only 1% of you are subscribed. Please subscribe because at 1,000 subscribers, I will post a special video for you.
The cell reeked of death. Bloodstains marred the metallic walls, and the air was heavy with the acrid stench of decay and fear. Dr. Eric Varn, a seasoned war medic from Earth, sat cross-legged on the cold floor, his hands bound by alien restraints that bit into his wrists. The soft hum of the cell's containment field vibrated through the silence, a cruel reminder of his capture by the Xanther Dominion. Eric's mind raced. Days of interrogation had revealed little about his captor's intentions, but the lack of immediate execution hinted at something worse. He wasn't a soldier, he didn't hold military secrets. His expertise was patching up the broken and dying, a skill that had made him invaluable during the war. Now, in this prison, it seemed useless. The clang of the heavy cell door jolted him from his thoughts. Two Xanther guards, towering insectoid figures with shimmering chitinous armor, loomed in the entryway. Their multifaceted eyes glinted with malice as they shoved him further into the cell with the butt of a plasma staff. "Let's see how long the human lasts," one of them hissed in broken galactic common, mandibles clicking with cruel amusement. The door slammed shut behind them, the sound reverberating through the chamber. Eric squinted into the dim light, his senses on high alert. The air grew colder, and a faint growl echoed from the shadows. He froze, his pulse quickening. Something was in the cell with him. Eric strained his eyes, scanning the room. Then he saw it. Two glowing amber eyes pierced the darkness, locked onto him with predatory focus. The creature stepped forward, emerging slowly into the faint light. Its body was sleek yet massive, covered in scales that shimmered with an iridescent sheen. Powerful wings folded tightly against its back, and razor-sharp talons clicked against the floor with every step. It was unlike anything Eric had ever seen, a living nightmare. He recognized it from fragmented reports, a Xerisk, a legendary creature bred by the Xanther Dominion for warfare. Its reputation was one of unparalleled destruction, a weapon so fearsome it was rarely unleashed. The Xerisk halted a few meters from Eric, lowering its head to sniff the air. Its growl deepened, resonating through the chamber like a warning. Eric remained still, his instincts screaming at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. His bindings rendered him defenseless. Yet as he studied the creature, something about its movements caught his attention. Its left wing dragged slightly, and it favored one side as it moved. This wasn't just a predator, it was injured. "Of course," Eric muttered under his breath. "They throw me in with their broken killing machine." The Xerisk tilted its head, as if sensing his words. Eric's heart pounded as the creature prowled closer, its eyes narrowing. He knew enough about survival to recognize the thin line between aggression and desperation. This wasn't just a beast, it was a cornered one. Keeping his voice calm, Eric spoke softly. "Easy there, big guy. I'm not here to hurt you." The Xerisk stopped, watching him with unsettling intelligence. Eric swallowed hard. He had faced wounded soldiers in the heat of battle, patched up injuries under fire, and dealt with creatures far removed from humanity. This, however, was something entirely different. But if his hunch was correct, the Xerisk's injury was the key to surviving this encounter. "You're hurt," he said, keeping his tone steady. "I can help you. Let me help you." The Xerisk rumbled, its massive head dipping slightly, as if considering his words. Eric's mind raced. If he could gain its trust, he might not only survive but find a way out of this hellhole. The Xerisk watched him with an intensity that made every hair on Eric's neck stand on end. Its amber eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and its growl softened to a low rumble. The massive creature didn't lunge or bare its fangs. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, as if considering Eric's words. He took a slow breath, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm serious," Eric said softly. "You're hurt. That wing doesn't look like it's been working properly for a while. Infection, maybe." The Xerisk shifted its weight, dragging its injured wing across the floor with a scraping sound that echoed through the chamber. Its talons clicked rhythmically as it stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Eric's instinct screamed at him to back away, but he stayed rooted in place. Any sudden movements might shatter whatever fragile understanding he was building. "I've seen worse wounds," Eric continued, his tone calm and even. "But if you leave it untreated, it's going to kill you." The creature lowered itself slightly, its wings folding tighter against its body. Eric noticed the fluid oozing from the joint where the wing met its powerful shoulder. The scales around the wound were discolored and cracked, and the faint scent of decay wafted from the injury. His assessment was correct: infection. "All right," Eric murmured. "If we're going to do this, I need my hands free." The Xerisk tilted its head again, then moved with surprising speed. Its talons came down with a metallic screech, slicing through Eric's restraints with a single motion. He flinched but realized a moment later that the creature had been precise. His hands were freed, and not a single scratch marked his skin. "Well," Eric said, flexing his fingers, "that's a first." He moved cautiously, his every action slow and deliberate. If the Xerisk changed its mind, he'd be dead before he could react. Kneeling a few feet from the creature, he tore a strip from his shirt and held it up as a makeshift bandage. "This is going to hurt," he warned. The Xerisk rumbled again, this time quieter. Eric reached for the wound, his hands trembling slightly as he cleaned away the grime and pus. The creature flinched but didn't lash out. As he worked, Eric muttered to himself, more out of habit than necessity. "You've been through hell, haven't you? They didn't exactly treat you like royalty." The Xerisk huffed, a warm gust of air washing over him. Eric froze, realizing how close he was to its massive jaws. But the creature didn't move. Instead, it watched him with what he could only describe as curiosity. Using a small vial of disinfectant from the emergency kit hidden in his boot, Eric cleaned the wound more thoroughly. The Xerisk let out a low growl, its body tensing, but it didn't attack. Eric wrapped the bandage tightly around the joint, securing it as best he could with limited supplies. "There," he said, leaning back. "Not perfect, but it'll hold. You should feel better in a few hours." The Xerisk studied him, its gaze unwavering. Eric felt a strange connection forming, an unspoken understanding. For the first time since being thrown into the cell, he didn't feel completely alone. This wasn't just a beast, it was a being capable of thought, capable of recognizing what he had done. "Now," Eric said, wiping his hands on what was left of his shirt, "let's figure out how to get out of here." The Xerisk rumbled softly, its glowing eyes gleaming with a hint of approval. The hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the low rumbling of the Xerisk and the faint hum of the containment field. Eric sat with his back against the cold metal wall, his mind working as quickly as it could. He'd done his best to treat the Xerisk's injury, but now came the harder part: escaping. The Xerisk remained close, its massive frame coiled but relaxed, like a predator conserving energy. Its amber eyes followed Eric's every move, watching him with an intelligence that felt almost unsettling. "All right, big guy," Eric said, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. Let's figure out how to fix that." The Xerisk tilted its head slightly, the motion eerily human. Eric wasn't sure how much it understood, but it hadn't tried to kill him, which was a promising start. He studied the cell, noting the reinforced walls, the faint shimmer of the containment field at the door, and the surveillance camera embedded in the ceiling corner. "They've got this place locked down," Eric muttered, running a hand through his hair. "But if they underestimated you as much as they underestimated me, we might have a shot." The Xerisk rumbled softly, a sound that sent vibrations through the floor. Eric took it as encouragement. He began inspecting the cell more closely, focusing on the panel that controlled the containment field. It was designed for xanthophysiology, large buttons, grooves for insectoid appendages, but he was confident he could override it with the right tools. "I need something sharp," he said, glancing at the Xerisk. "Any chance you're willing to lend a claw?" The creature blinked slowly, then extended one massive talon. Eric hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer. He guided the Xerisk's claw to the panel, using its sharp tip to pry open the casing. Sparks flew, and Eric flinched, but the Xerisk remained perfectly still, its immense strength held in check. "Good," Eric murmured. "Now, let's see what we're dealing with." Inside the panel, a tangle of alien wires and circuits greeted him. Eric's training as a medic hadn't included engineering, but years in the field had forced him to learn the basics. Improvised repairs on life support systems, makeshift overrides for enemy tech, he'd done it all before. This wasn't entirely foreign to him. He reached into his boot and retrieved a small multi-tool he'd managed to keep hidden from the Xanther guards. With delicate precision, he began rerouting the power, redirecting energy from the containment field to the surveillance camera. "If this works," he said, glancing at the Xerisk, "they'll think the field's still active while we slip out." The Xerisk huffed softly, its warm breath washing over him. Eric took that as a sign to continue. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, The panel let out a soft beep, and the shimmering containment field flickered before vanishing. Eric stood back, wiping sweat from his brow. "Okay," he said. "We're good to go." The Xerisk rose to its full height, its wings spreading slightly. Eric felt the air shift as the creature's powerful frame moved toward the now unlocked door. It paused, turning its head to look back at him. Yeah, I'm coming," Eric muttered, grabbing his multi-tool and slipping it into his pocket. Together, they stepped into the corridor beyond the cell. The sterile halls of the Xanther prison were dimly lit, the faint hum of distant machinery filling the air. Eric glanced around, trying to orient himself. He didn't know the layout, but he knew they couldn't afford to linger. The Xerisk took the lead, moving with surprising silence for a creature of its size. Eric followed closely, his heart pounding. He didn't know how long they had before the guards noticed the breach, but the thought of being recaptured wasn't an option. They passed several cells, each one housing prisoners of various alien species. Some of them stirred, watching with wide eyes as the Xerisk prowled by. Eric felt their stares but kept his focus on the path ahead. As they turned a corner, the sound of voices reached them. Xanther guards. Eric froze, his mind racing. There was no cover, no way to avoid being seen. The Xerisk let out a low growl, its wings flaring slightly. Eric grabbed its shoulder, or at least as close to a shoulder as the massive creature had. "Wait," he whispered. "We don't need to fight all of them. Not yet." He scanned the hallway and spotted a vent cover near the floor. It was small, but if he could loosen it, they might be able to bypass the guards entirely. Eric knelt, using his multi-tool to unscrew the cover as quickly and quietly as possible. The Xerisk crouched beside him, its body tensed. The guards' voices grew louder, their footsteps echoing down the hall. Eric worked faster, his hands trembling slightly. Finally, the last screw came free, and he pulled the vent cover aside. "In you go," he whispered, motioning to the Xerisk. The creature hesitated for only a moment before squeezing into the vent. Eric followed, pulling the cover back into place behind him. They crawled through the narrow space, the sounds of the guards fading as they moved deeper into the maze of the prison. When they finally emerged into a maintenance corridor, Eric let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to the Xerisk, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Not bad for a team effort," he said. The Xerisk huffed softly, its glowing eyes meeting his. Eric couldn't be sure, but he thought he saw something resembling amusement in its gaze. "Let's keep moving," he said. "We're not out of this yet." Together, they pressed on, their unlikely alliance growing stronger with each step. The maintenance corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit and eerily silent. Eric and the Xerisk moved cautiously, each step taking them further from the cell that had nearly been their grave. The Xerisk's claws clicked softly against the metallic floor, its massive body blending into the shadows as they advanced. Eric's heart raced, his senses on high alert. They had evaded the guards, but the Xanther Dominion wouldn't remain unaware of their escape for long. At the far end of the corridor, Eric spotted a junction. One path led to a stairwell marked with alien glyphs, the other to a series of mechanical conduits. He stopped, considering their options. "Any idea which way leads out?" Eric muttered to the Xerisk. The creature tilted its head, its glowing eyes scanning the paths ahead. It rumbled softly and nudged Eric toward the stairwell. "All right, you're the boss," Eric said, moving carefully toward the stairs. The ascent was grueling. The stairwell spiraled upward, the air growing colder with each step. Eric felt the strain in his legs, but the Xerisk climbed effortlessly, its powerful frame coiled and ready for action. As they reached the upper levels, Eric heard the faint hum of activity, a command center or guard station perhaps. He motioned for the Xerisk to stop, pressing himself against the wall to listen. Voices echoed down the hall, guttural and sharp. He couldn't make out the words, but the urgency in their tone was clear. The guards had discovered the breach. "We're out of time," Eric whispered, glancing at the Xerisk. "If we wait, they'll surround us." The Xerisk growled low in agreement, stepping forward. Eric realized the creature wasn't interested in waiting or hiding. It wanted to fight. "All right," Eric said, gripping the multi-tool in his pocket. "Let's do it your way." They moved into the hall, the Xerisk leading with its wings partially unfurled. The guards turned as one, their chitinous armor glinting under the harsh overhead lights. For a moment they froze, clearly not expecting to see their beast loose and alongside the human prisoner. "Shoot it," one of the guards barked, raising his plasma rifle. The Zarisk reacted with blinding speed. It lunged forward, its talons tearing through the closest guard before the others could fire. The sound of shredding metal filled the corridor as the creature unleashed its fury. Eric darted to the side, using the chaos to his advantage. He grabbed a fallen guard's plasma rifle, the alien weapon heavy in his hands but familiar enough to operate. He fired a quick burst at the remaining guards, the plasma bolts striking their armor and sending them stumbling. The Zarisk finished the job, its massive jaws clamping down on one guard while its tail swept another off his feet. Within moments, the hall was clear. Eric leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," he said, looking at the Zarisk. The creature rumbled softly, its glowing eyes scanning for more threats. They pressed on, the sounds of distant alarms growing louder. Eric knew the Xanther wouldn't let them escape easily. As they moved deeper into the complex, the halls widened into a large chamber filled with machinery and towering consoles. A massive viewport overlooked the barren landscape of the Xanther homeworld. "This must be a control hub," Eric said, moving to one of the consoles. He studied the alien interface, his mind racing. "If I can disable the locks on the hangar bay, we might have a chance to steal a ship." The Zarisk prowled the room, its presence an imposing deterrent to anyone who might enter. Eric worked quickly, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The glyphs were complex, but years of experience with alien technology gave him enough insight to decipher their function. "Got it," he exclaimed as the console beeped and the locks disengaged. "The hangar doors are open. Now we just need to..." Before he could finish, the chamber's main doors burst open. A squad of Xanther guards poured in, their weapons trained on Eric and the Zarisk. "Don't move," one of them shouted, his mandibles clicking aggressively. "Surrender or we'll kill you both." Eric raised his hands, the plasma rifle dangling loosely from his fingers. "You're welcome to try," he said, glancing at the Zarisk. The creature roared, a deafening sound that shook the chamber. It launched itself at the guards, its wings spreading wide as it tore through their ranks. Eric ducked behind a console, firing at the guards from cover. Plasma bolts filled the air, the heat searing the walls and machinery. The Zarisk fought with unmatched ferocity, its talons ripping through armor and weapons alike. The guards were no match for its strength and speed. Within minutes, the squad lay defeated, the chamber quiet once more. Eric stepped out from behind the console, his chest heaving. "We need to move," he said, gesturing toward the exit. "The hangar's this way." The Zarisk rumbled in agreement, following him down a narrow passage that led to the hangar bay. When they arrived, Eric's breath caught. Rows of sleek Xanther ships lined the massive chamber, their sharp designs exuding speed and power. "This will do," Eric said, sprinting toward the nearest vessel. He climbed into the cockpit, the Zarisk squeezing into the cargo hold. The controls were alien, but Eric had spent enough time with captured Xanther ships to know the basics. The engine roared to life, the ship lifting off the ground as the hangar doors opened to the barren sky. "Hold on!" Eric shouted as he punched the throttle. The ship shot forward, leaving the Xanther prison far behind. As they soared through the atmosphere, Eric glanced back at the Zarisk. It lay coiled in the hold, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "We did it," Eric said, a smile tugging at his lips. "We're free." The Zarisk rumbled softly, its gaze meeting his. For the first time, Eric felt a sense of camaraderie with the creature, a bond forged in survival and defiance. Together, they had beaten the odds. Together, they would face whatever came next.